Hello, this is my second video which I'm uploading to YouTube, and I thought this time I would talk about my first novel. I wrote this during the year of the Great Lockdown. Lots of people did various things. I wrote a novel. It was called The Baskervilles Dustjacket, and this is how it looked in its final form. The picture I chose at the top is of a firework display, and it's relevant because it's in the setting of that event that one of the final dramatic moments of the novel occurs. I'm going to read first of all the summary on the back cover, the sort of thing that you would read in any bookshop. The unwrapping of a brown paper parcel found at the bottom of a box of old tatty-looking books revealed a fantastic discovery, a first edition of The Hound of the Baskervilles, containing autographed pieces of handwriting by Arthur Conan Doyle, together with the torn pieces of a unique dust jacket. For the elderly Monty Warnock, book dealer, gentle and retiring resident of Peterborough, this was the first of many events over a period of some 9 months. Horrific attacks on friends, another on himself, shadowy rumours of terrorist activity, a London auction result, a holiday in Italy, ending with a firework display, morphing into a terrifying and fatal explosion on the shores of Lake Garda. These minor matters aside, this is a read which brings together everyday life in Peterborough for Monty and his friends, touring the fens, the business of selling second-hand books, music, the local church playing the organ, tragedies, multicultural traditions, romance and art. And the whole is served with a giant dose of nostalgia. The book actually opens with nostalgia. As the writer, I'm harping back to my days as a child when I lived at King's Lynn, where I was born. And this is a recollection of driving between Peterborough and Hunstanton. If there is an urge to combine the feeling of nostalgia with a drive across peaceful and seemingly never-changing countryside, then the journey from Hunstanton to Peterborough can often provide all that's necessary. There is enough of the Edwardian seaside town left to make one feel that time has stood still, especially if one's memory doesn't reach back to before the railway, pier and station disappeared. To stroll through the gardens, past the bowling green, and along toward the old lighthouse until the view of the pink-striped cliff face comes into view, provides scenery which is probably little changed in over 100 years. On a clear day, one can look out to sea and just spot the coastline close to Skegness. Looking in the opposite direction, across the gardens and the main road, there is an attractive row of Edwardian villas. My own feelings of nostalgia stem from memories of annual Sunday school trips from King's Lynn by steam train to the seaside, organised by the Reverend A.W. Allworthy, and how appropriate was his surname, Vicar of St. John's Church. Races on the green followed by sandwiches and buns in a nearby hall doesn't seem very exciting by today's standards. But to a small boy, me, in the very early 1950s, it was heaven. To come back to Hunstanton from time to time has a quality almost of a pilgrimage, in which I can drift back in time and just wallow in nostalgic pleasure. During the course of the novel, lots of different things happen to Monty and his friends, all related to things connected with the main thrust of the novel, leading up to the auction of the book, acquiring a lot of money, and going on an expensive holiday. There is one night in the run-up to the auction when he has a terrible nightmare and he finds himself dreaming all sorts of strange things. It involves 3 of his friends. It also involves lots of musical instruments, percussion instruments. Perhaps I wrote it that way because in an earlier life as a teacher, I also taught music. Anyway, this is my attempt at a nightmare. Several loud and frightening bells were ringing, and police were pouring into the bidding room of Trumpington's auction house. This cacophonic row obliterated the actions of the auctioneer, who sat frozen, with his mallet poised on the final bid for my book. A telephone bid had just been accepted at £3.75 million. People were stamping and shouting. Joseph and Charles, auctioneers, were dancing a jig on their table. A group of the porters picked up instruments which were to be sold later and provided an impromptu accompaniment for this visual display. Another porter was juggling with books, one of which was the hound, my hound. Police still charged in, firemen sliding down poles, their hoses squirting feathers. Nothing but nothing seemed to silence the bells. Indeed, they got louder and louder. Mavis and Muriel were clashing cymbals, Ken jumping from kettle drum to kettle drum, beating them with steel heels. I screamed, reached down, opened my suitcase and stuffed in my head, pulled the zip until I was choking on a mouthful of smelly socks. A voice, at last a voice, a quiet, calm and gentle, ordinary voice. Monty, Ken here. If you can hear this, ring me. A click and blissful silence. I was surrounded by black and trapped in this choking cloth. No, not cloth. Certainly not smelly socks. Just the corner of a pillow, which I was chewing while buried under the duvet. At once, police and firemen disappeared. Nobody was dancing. Mavis and Muriel with cymbals had vanished. Not a kettle drum in sight, because Ken was awaiting my call. Something of the automaton in me took over. One click and light showed my bedroom in absolute normality. Not one book on the move. My mobile clock displayed 5:30. Now, that was a horror to generate any nightmare. Eventually, Monty went to London for the auction of this great book, which, because of the additional writings by Arthur Conan Doyle, signed autograph writings, was exceptionally rare and valuable. And this is how I describe that event. The chapter that it starts I have called Not a Nightmare. Ladies and gentlemen, we come now to lot 141, the first edition, Noons, from 1902, of The Hound of the Baskerville, containing 3 pieces of verified handwriting by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, and of which 2 have been signed. Despite research, we have been unable to identify the lad Albert, nor his father, knowing no more than what the author has told us. Albert, a son of Arthur, who was employed by the publishers George Noons. In addition to finding this copy in a job lot of books purchased at a provincial auction, the vendor also found a dust jacket torn into 3 pieces, each folded up and being used as bookmarkers in some old gardening volumes. No dust jacket was issued by the publisher for the first edition. This one had been homemade, using materials contemporary with the book. The design of the dust jacket makes use of the motifs used on the boards and makes further use of some of the illustrations. All who have seen it agree that as a dust jacket it works well and is worth keeping with the book. As you know, after much discussion between experts and our highly experienced paper restorer, it was decided to reassemble the 3 pieces of the dust jacket. You'll be pleased to know that all who have seen the finished work, including some quite eminent people in this field of paper conservation, are united in saying that an extraordinarily successful and most satisfying piece of restoration has been achieved. 1 facsimile only, and marked as such, has been made and given to the vendor. Another facsimile has been used during the viewing period, but this will be destroyed as soon as the item is sold. Lot 141 may not be the most valuable item in today's sale, but many would argue its being the most interesting. There has been a great deal of pre-sale interest, several bids left with me, 5 telephone lines have been booked, and the internet is singing with activity. I can therefore open the bidding at, did I detect the merest hint of a dramatic pause? £45,000, looking for 50,000. 50,000 bid, thank you, sir, looking for 55,000. With speed, the price rose to 75,000. Here it held momentarily, the auctioneer looking at those holding the telephones, glancing at his online monitor. At 75,000. 75,000. I can take bids of 2,500 if it helps. 77,500. 80,000. 82,500. 82,500. On line 2. 82,500 then. Are there any more bids? Fair warning then. At £82,500. Once. Twice. Sold for £82,500. Telephone line 2, number 1944. Thank you. A resounding knock from the gavel set off a good round of applause and brought to a close, in a breath-holding spell of only a few seconds, a delightful piece of bidding. I was thrilled. My fellow enthusiasts and supporters, can I use that expression, were all like me smiling. Without the auctioneer's introduction, the actual bidding was probably over in less than a minute. But now, celebrations. At the culmination of action and thought, which all started with my choosing those scruffy boxes, scrabbling around the bottom of one, and unwrapping a most tatty-looking brown paper parcel one wet autumnal Saturday. We were at the end of the row, so were able to slip out quietly to meet Joseph and Charles in one of the nearby adjoining rooms. They too smiled as we came in, handshakes all round, and it was Muriel who asked the obvious. Do you know who bought the book? In this case, yes, but frequently we don't. Today the actual winner is not here, but his nominated agent is, and he'll be through in a moment. The book has been bought by someone in Italy, and his agent is, here he is, Andreas. Come and meet the vendor of your Conan Doyle item. A pleasure, Joseph. Just the merest hint of an accent revealed that Andreas was not from the UK, but clearly he had lived here for many years. I take it was you at the end of telephone line 2? And you must be Monty Warnock. I hope you were pleased with the outcome. It might have been higher, because my instructions were very precise. Bid until you win. The final price was a bit above estimate, but the buyer will be well pleased. I don't often have the pleasure of bidding auctions, and this is the first time I've been able to do so using someone else's money and with no upper limit. Have you told the buyer yet? Oh, no need to do that. The call was being relayed automatically, so he could hear both me and the auctioneer. He said nothing, the buyer that is, nothing from start to finish. Just breathed a sigh of relief and thanked me. But then he couldn't lose. I'm going to read just one more extract, and this is for near the end, and it concerns that firework display and what happened during the course of it. Now, you need to imagine that holidaymakers and local people are sitting in the town square, Gardoni, looking down the slope towards the shore of Lake Garda. They've been listening to a concert of opera choruses. Now it's getting dark, the music has finished, and the firework display is about to start. Just as the display was reaching its zenith, I became aware of a distant hum, the throbbing of an engine. I nudged Mavis and cupped my ear to signal sound, and she nodded agreement. And as we realized, so did others. A distant powered boat was approaching from some way out in the lake, headlights bouncing on the surface. And far behind, 2 further powered craft appeared to be in pursuit. The first boat was increasing in speed and heading off to our left towards some of the larger leisure craft from which people had been listening to the music and now watching the fireworks. What on earth was intended, and how a major collision was to be avoided, it was hard to imagine. At that moment, the lights of the fireworks began to fade, as did the explosions, and we could all see this potential disaster unfolding before us. Chaos seemed to break out. People stood up, were shouting. Some leapt down from their raised seatings to go to the lakeside wall. But everybody was powerless. Nobody could act. Mavis cried out, "John, Genevieve, it's their yacht. Their yacht is under attack." As we looked in its direction, another engine roared into life, and the yacht seemed to leap forward and accelerate away from its target position, as did two other craft, fore and aft. Through this sudden gap, the first powered speedboat leapt, careering on towards the wall. The following craft suddenly slowed, but their headlights picked out a man making a desperate leap from the rocketing speedboat. With a certainty now beyond question, we all watched in unison, awaiting what turned out to be a phenomenal explosive blast of flame and noise which completely dwarfed all that the firework display had left in our memories. Flame and light obliterated everything else from sight, but which must have included a powered boat being blasted into thousands of pieces to land over a wide area of shore and lake. Almost as an anticlimax, and when our eyes adjusted, we looked back to one of the following craft as a man was being hauled from the water. Was he the only occupant, or the only one able to save himself? Perhaps we had just witnessed the equivalent of a waterborne suicide bomber. Fireboats arrived quite quickly and doused the still burning shrubs along the shoreline at the point of collision. Lake Garda's waters extinguished the rest, and pitch darkness returned. This was soon replaced by street lighting, and when safety lights came on, members of a very shocked audience could climb down from their seats to wander about, white-faced, to huddle in whispering groups, to make for the bars and large brandies, return to hotels, car parks and hillside villas. For many, the onset of sleep would be much delayed. Places can recover at speed, and within 30 minutes or so, Gardoni returned to its late-night holiday atmosphere, and no doubt by daybreak the staging and seats would be stacked to await the lorries, and the walkways swept to impeccable cleanliness. Along the shore, the lapping waters would have dispersed much of the debris, and a team of gardeners would have raked smooth the blackened shrubs and flowers. Well, those are the extracts I've chosen to read. It hasn't been easy to do. I'm not experienced in making videos, but I've enjoyed the attempt. The next video I make, I think I'll say a little about my latest novel, which I've just handed over to Kindle Direct Publishing, as it is now finished. Well, till the next video. Cheerio.